Let's make a start. I know it's school holidays, and even if people don't have children, they go on holiday, so it's nice to see you here. We are going to look at something that I was saying earlier that I read lots of books about what's wrong with the world, and people like Jordan Peterson and others are very good at saying that. You read the newspapers and so on. And I think that Paul summarizes it better than anybody. So on our Romans road, we've kind of got to the bit where he talks about the gospel, the good news, he wants to share it, and he's giving the reasons why he needs to share it, and one of them is the world's gone to pot, and we're going to see what that is just now. Now, you're going to get about 25 minutes to discuss things. My voice isn't all that great, so hopefully you'll be able to discuss quite freely. And there are lots. I'll raise some questions for you. But I want to begin with a video which shows two things. It shows a very beautiful world, and then it also shows an ugly world. So we live in a world that's full of beauty and full of ugliness. And to give you, just to explain it this way, supposing we could do a flyover of Newcastle right now and see into everyone's home, you would see great beauty and you would also see great ugliness that would at the same time make you wonder, why doesn't God just nuke the whole place? Or, and that always goes on. That's nothing new. So here's an example of this. This is from the film Good Morning Vietnam.
Good morning, Vietnam! Hey, it's another delightful day here in vacation land. Everybody, time to get up wherever you are. That's right, rise and shine, rise and shine. Got some songs going out right now to a couple of guys on the road to Nhat Trang. You know what I'm talking about. Hey, Mr. O'Malley, you know, the Irish Dolby twins. They're out there. Special song going out to you right now.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying how do you do. They're really saying I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I never knew. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Louis B. Armstrong, the great Satchmo.
Okay, well, I watched, there's a brilliant BBC series on Vietnam which makes the futility of that war just such a beautiful country and so much damage done. Now, we read about a lot about Gaza, a little less about Ukraine just now. But war has always been horrific. And the Vietnamese War was probably the first war that was televised, and that had an enormous impact on people. Had an enormous impact in Australia, by the way. Australia was very good at accepting Vietnamese boat refugees, and I'm particularly grateful for that because my dentist was a Vietnamese boat refugee, and he's a great dentist. So I hope he listens to this. So let's go to Romans 7. You got it on your sheet. Romans 1, 28 to 32. And since they didn't think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, God gave them over to a depraved mind so that they do what ought not to be done. None of us would like to say that we have a depraved mind. If I've said someone was depraved, you think of someone who's particularly vicious or particularly wicked. But all human beings have minds which are depraved. One of the reasons I became a Christian was as I was studying, you think I might have an obsession with war, I probably did. As I was studying Nazi Germany, the thing that really shook me was I could have been one of those. I could have been a Nazi soldier quite easily. Because all human beings, we have what Solzhenitsyn called this dividing line between good and evil going right through the middle of every human heart. Now here's the interesting thing. When someone like Richard Dawkins argues, he says humans are religious because they're irrational, and if only they became more rational, then they wouldn't need religion. And if you get rid of religion, then human beings will be more rational. Now I haven't spoken to Mr. Dawkins for many years, but I'd love to say to him, how's it working out for you? How have we become more rational? You would have to be off your head to think that our society has become more rational. The mind that rejects God does not think straight or rationally or morally and behaves so as to distort and destroy God's good order for relationships as originally created by him. Now, be careful here. Let's be very clear about what Paul is saying. He's not saying that people cannot do good things. Of course they can. Or that in all times they behave like this at all times in every detail. He's saying that when a society departs from the Creator's intention, this is what happens. And that's why those of you who are Christians should not be surprised at the way society is going. Why would it surprise you? John Stott describes it this way: because we do not see fit to retain the knowledge of God, he gave them over to an unfit mind, and this did not just lead to sexual immorality, but to a whole variety of antisocial practices which ought not to be done, and which together describe the breakdown of human community as standards disappear and society disintegrates. So the next section, 29 to 31, there's a list he gives of these depraved actions. It's not an extensive list, but there are 21 of them. And you'll notice the opposites. There's wickedness and goodness, there's evil and good, there's greed and generosity, there's depravity and wholeness. And there's an idea here of life and habit. The first time you do something wrong, you're maybe really horrified by a particular thing. I'm thinking of our oldest daughter. She's well beyond this now. But when she was a very small child, she came back from the shop where we were living up in the Scottish Highlands, and she had stolen a sweet. I think her mother asked her, if I've got this right, Annabelle, that where did you get that? And her mother taught her a very important lesson. Walked her back to the shop and shamefacedly had to confess it and, give it back or pay for it or whatever. You do something like that once, you feel ashamed. You do it twice, less shame. You do it third time, and it just happens that we get into habits of doing things that are wrong. And that's what he talks about here. There's 5 sins that are all about human relationships. And again, you set them as opposites. So there's envy, and then there's honoring others. There's murder, and there's life. There's strife, and there's peace. There's deceit, and there's honesty. there's malice, and there's kindness. And we see all these things in our society. So, the gentleman who found my wallet just out there, he could have taken the money that was in it. He could have done that and just thrown it away. Instead, he went to all the bother of phoning me, and then he was going to deliver it to my house. Now, I'm not saying he did that because he was a Christian. I don't actually know. He probably isn't. But there's something within human beings as well. We can be honest, but we can also be dishonest. There are people, and maybe some of you here, you've just put that extra zero on your tax return, which means that you get an extra couple of $100, because you know the chances of the tax man really checking on you is very low. But that's dishonesty. In a sense, that is stealing. Then there are two gossip sins. Gossips who are, and the word is literally whisperers behind doors. Not people who accuse people openly of things, but behind doors. And there's that, and the contrast to that is building others up. Or they're slanderers, and the word that's used for that is someone who stabs someone in the back. And the opposite of that is also building others up. Then there's 4 sins of pride. There's God haters, God lovers. There's the insolent. The word that's used is the word hybristes, which means one who behaves with humiliating and unconscionable arrogance to those who are not powerful enough to retaliate. So it's humility. It's not humility, rather, it's hubris. And there's an arrogance and a boastfulness, he says. And again, the answer to all of that is humility. There are 2 others. They invent ways of doing evil instead of obeying God's way of doing good. Human beings are very disingenuous at creating ways of doing evil. And they disobey their parents. And the opposite of that, of course, is honoring our parents. You invent ways of doing evil. I was thinking about that with, I don't know if I like mentioning this, the mushroom murders thing. And the reason I mention it is the woman concerned was fascinated with crime podcasts. And ironically, she's going to get what she wanted, because she's going to be, there's going to be loads of crime podcasts about her. There was a fascination with it. Why was there a fascination with that? But inventing ways of doing evil, thinking about ways that you could poison people. Human beings can be disingenuous or ingenuous in that. There are 4 negatives. They're senseless, they have no understanding, that is. They are faithless, they have no fidelity. They are heartless, they have no love. And they are ruthless, they have no mercy. And he rubs it in by basically saying they're without brains, without honor, without love, without pity. And this is because of the rejection of God and the acceptance of false religion. Now, you might be inclined to say, that's not fair, that's not what I do. But I challenge you, be honest, go through this list and tick the ones that you've done to some degree or other. And there's a lot. I don't have a full house, but I came pretty close when I thought about it. People might say that this is a dark picture and that Paul is exaggerating. But the Greek and the Latin authors of the time are far more brutal. Paul was telling the truth. Greco-Roman society, pagan society as well, the majority of people were slaves, class structure was inflexible, there was infanticide, and people sought their entertainment through gladiators and violence. As our society regresses back to that, you will see that happening more and more. Okay, let me just say something about the last bit there, sinning with knowledge, because that's also one of the questions. So when he says, they know that those who do such things deserve death, the wages of sin is death, he's not here talking about the death penalty. He's not saying you get the death penalty because you boast. He's saying that you separate yourself from God, and ultimately that is eternal death. Now, he's saying that people know of God through his revelation, through creation. We don't need to say to people, you shouldn't steal and you shouldn't murder, because they know that. Now, Jacques is talking about doing he's going to do a kind of meeting going through the 10 Commandments, which is really important. But the 10 Commandments are universal. And it's a real shame that our society, and sometimes the church, moves away from basic laws to creating tens of thousands of minor laws. But he's saying we know. We continue to practice the very things that will lead to judgment. They boast when they do evil, and they encourage others to do the same. I would argue that there are some things we're ignorant of. We don't know that they're wrong, but maybe we get a sense that they are. But to be honest, most sin, we know it's wrong. We know, and we go against what we know. And that creates phenomenal problems. It creates phenomenal problems in society and for us as well. So, we're going to look at a little bit of the solution to all of that. But you've got the questions and stuff there. As usual, please do come up with one question from each table. If you've got any questions you want to ask me just now, feel free, put your hand up and I'll come over. But you've got some, there's a lot in that. So, have fun. All right. Noah, do you want to come and help? Do you want to come and help? Good man. So you're going to take the mic. Noah, it's here. You need to walk, okay, because the mic is a very precious piece of equipment. And I wanted to take it up to your table where your mum and dad are. Take it to them first. And then wait, and we'll get you to take it to another. So, what I'm going to do before you get your question, I'm going to actually ask each table one of the questions. Your one I'm going to ask you, are we born sinful? What was your answer?
Yes.
Yes. Correct. Now, the reason for that, there's a thing called a tabula rasa, which is a blank slate. And the idea is that everyone's born with a blank slate, and that it's only later on that they learn evil. Whereas I actually think modern genetics would suggest otherwise as well. But I would also say any of you who've got young children, and I'm not looking at you in particular, but you can see that there are tendencies to disobedience and various other things that they weren't taught by their school and they weren't taught by their parents. So, Jan. Yeah. Yeah. So I was born in sin. I'm sinful from the day. That's Psalm 51. There's also, thanks, Jan. There's also the idea that, when we say born sinful, we're not saying that, little babies are evil. They're all evil. What we're saying is that everyone is born with something within us which tends towards sin. And I do think the genetic aspect is really strong. I remember being really struck with, you may think this is really strange, but when our son was born, I think when he was about 2 or 3 years old, I noticed he was pointing with this finger. And we didn't do that, and nobody else he knew did that, except his grandfather did that. And his grandfather was dead by then, and we were thinking, why would he do this? We all of us we inherit genetic things. And I don't think it's stretching it too far to say that we inherit in our human nature what the Bible or what Christian doctrine is called total depravity, which isn't the idea that we're as bad as we could be, but it's the idea that sin affects every part of our life and every part of our society. Okay, what was your question?
Okay, so my question, we were discussing the fact that we thought we were born sinful with the capacity to do evil. So in the Garden of Eden, obviously, Adam and Eve did the wrong thing and they sinned. But when Jesus returns and there's a new heaven and a new earth, is there no capacity to sin anymore? I.e., I was thinking before, it was also connected to free will.
Yeah.
And sometimes you hear, you have to choose the good things. So, when there's a new heaven and new earth, is there no capacity to sin anymore?
Okay. So that's one of the classic questions. Will we be able to sin in heaven? And if we're not, how do we have free will? Right. So, how's your Latin? Okay. So let's do some Latin. This is from Augustine. So he spoke of human beings And he said they were posse non peccare when they were created. So they were able not to sin. In other words, Adam and Eve could have said no. When they fell, human beings became non posse peccare, which meant that we weren't able not to sin. Nobody, every single human being is going to sin. When we become Christians, it's not that we become sinless. We're back to being able not to sin, although we wrestle, we struggle. So when we get onto Romans 7, the good that I don't want to do, that I do not do. In heaven, because we have freely chosen to love God, then all possibility of sin is removed. Because sin is taken out of the whole environment. There's nothing sinful in heaven, and we won't be sinful. And how does that affect our free will? Well, we've already chosen. So it's a bit like before you get married, you've got a choice. You know, you could have chosen 10 different husbands, maybe 100 different husbands. I don't know, you could have. But when you choose the one, you marry them, and that's it. Well, at least that's what it should be. In the same way, again, that too gets affected by human sin. But when we choose God, when we're taken out of this sinful environment, then we have already chosen not to sin, and God protects us in that. So we're still loving, we're not compelled to, but we've chosen to, and then we wouldn't want to, I think. Right, Noah, can you bring it onto this table here, please? This one over here. This one over, you see them? That one. Hand it to somebody at the table, anyone who wants it. Yep, them. Noah, that over there, look. There you are. Is it going to Jacques? Okay. So Jacques better get back. So the question I want to ask you, are some sins greater than others?
Well, we thought that there were sins greater than others, just based on the fact that if someone is
Thank you.
brutally killed or something like that versus a child taking a lolly, the impact of the sin is far greater if someone's murdered.
Yeah.
So we feel like some sins are worse than others. That's just being honest.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's what the Bible says, but that's what we sort of thought. Did everyone feel that way? I thought so. Yeah.
Yeah. So all sin is against God, but there are greater and lesser sins. One of the reasons we know that is it says in Revelation that the dead are judged according to what they've done. So it's not just that, hey, you're all sinners, that's it. So Adolf Hitler is not the same as somebody, for example, who's never committed a murder. So there are obviously degrees of sin. You also see that in the Levitical sacrifices for different things as well. And, I mean, what you've said is basic common sense and logic as well. And, I mean, I know this is not the Bible, but Dante's Inferno, he talks about different degrees of hell. And actually, he's not wrong. I think that some are judged in this way, some are judged in that way. The Bible indicates that. Paul in Corinthians says it, for example. Incidentally, Dante had popes at the highest level of hell who were... and he was an Italian Catholic. He was basically saying bad popes, you know. So very, very interesting. So no, all sins are not equal. It wouldn't make sense to say that they were all equal. They're all against God, but there are different sins. If I go home just now and I drive at 63 kilometers an hour in a 60 kilometer zone, I guess you could say that's a sin. It's not quite the same as if I aim my car and hit somebody. You know, so obviously there are differences. What was your question?
The question was sort of the flip side of this. How do we die to self? Because Jesus said, if you want to follow me, carry a cross and deny yourself. So how do we practically do that?
Wow, I wish I knew the answer. Seriously, there's a marvelous sermon by Tim Keller. It's made into a booklet called The Blessed Self-Forgetfulness. I think the Bible indicates the primary way we die to self is to look at Christ. It's not putting yourself down. It's not trying to say, oh, I'm the most miserable person, because you're still self-obsessed. with that. If you're thinking about yourself all the time, it's learning to look beyond yourself to something greater. And you look to Christ, but what that also means is you look to others. You give yourself for others. So I do think that's found in the gospel. That's a really good question, by the way. It's hard to do. Right, Noah, where are you? Can you grab the mic? Can you take it to the middle table, please? Right here, where Annabelle is. Okay. And your question, my question for you is, what sins do you think characterize our society? Did you have any? You didn't get to that. Okay, I'll leave that then. Oh, you did?
We had a bit of difficulty.
Use the mic, Joe, so we can, yeah.
We just had a bit of difficulty with the word sin, as opposed to kind of wrongdoing, because sin kind of seemed to have specific implications, perhaps, for some of us. So,
yeah, okay. So I would say that sin and wrongdoing are the same thing. That wrongdoing against other people is also a sin against God. So at an extreme level, if I kill another human being, that human being is made in the image of God. If I destroy the creation is made by God. So all wrongdoing is sin. In fact, Paul says that. Sin is wrongdoing, all wrongdoing is sin. So I would just put the two things together in that way. All right, did you have a question?
Well, some of us are troubled by the concept of being born sinful. So even though Leon said that that's what it is, clearly we live in a society that has rules and regulations which are based on Christian principles. So is our awareness of what is right or wrong truly innate, or is it a function of living in such a society so we acquire that information externally?
Okay. Right, wow. So that's the idea of, and it's a classic argument, and I'm just treading into Joe's territory here, and yours, Steve, actually, as well. You know, is it caught or taught? You know, is it society that gets you to do something, or is it something within yourself? And I think the answer biblically, and I also think observationally, is both. So it's both. We will inherit some things almost genetically and for others, and, you know, but also what our culture teaches us will affect us. So it's a commonplace, but it's true. If you're brought up in a home where there's a lot of domestic violence, you're much more likely to engage in domestic violence. You know, and that doesn't excuse it, but it's saying your circumstances absolutely affect where you're at. So the Bible does the two things. It describes our world as being beautiful and perverse, and it describes human beings individually as being beautiful and perverse. So we still have responsibility. I think when you take away responsibility from people, the only way that you can end up doing that is saying someone is a complete, you know, sociopath or something, that they have no responsibility for what they're doing. And that's very, very few people. Very, very few. Most of us, you can still say, look, I know your circumstances were bad. I know you were taught this. I know you were brought up in this way. But can you not see that this is wrong? And I think we'll come on in next week. We're going to go into Romans 2, where Paul contrasts the knowledge that we get from revealed information and the knowledge that we get from what's internally ours. And I think the answer to your question basically is conscience. Where does our conscience come from? You know, is conscience something just that we're taught? Or is it something that develops, that we've already got? And I would say it's because we're made in the image of God, we all have a sense of right and wrong. And I would say that. So being born sinful, we have to be really careful. It doesn't mean that, you know, the first words that kids speak are violent words or whatever. It just means we have this innate tendency towards what Joseph Conrad called the heart of darkness. And I think that's in everybody. I really do. I mean, maybe some of you here have never had any dark thoughts. Well, God bless you that He's protected you in that way. But that certainly ain't me. And some of us get horrified at the dark thoughts that we can have. And maybe if our circumstances were different, you know, we might be like that too. You know, there but for the grace of God go I, many of us could say. Because we know what's within us. And that's why Paul at the end of his life could say, I am the chief of sinners. No, I was. So I think, yeah, that's, as I expected, a good question. Noah, do you want to hand it on to the last table there, please? Okay. Who's going with this one? Matt?
Someone else want to ask a question?
Matt, do we sin out of ignorance? Before you do your question. Did you get that one? Do we sin out of ignorance?
Am I on? Oh,
yes.
Yeah. Well, there are sins we commit where we're not really sure what we're doing, where we don't even see what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Do we sin out of ignorance? No, I don't think it's ignorance is causing us to sin, but I'm stumped. I can't remember what we got to with this one.
Well, I'm gonna answer you from Scripture, because we can sin out of ignorance. So, for example, if Leviticus 5:17, if anyone sins and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, even though they do not know it, they are guilty and will be held responsible. They must bring to the priest as a guilt offering a ram from the flock, and so on. In this way, the priest will make atonement for them for the wrong they've committed unintentionally, and they'll be forgiven. So atonement was made for that. So there are things that you imagine in our society. I have sinned out of ignorance. I got a speeding fine once, and I wasn't deliberately going over. I just thought it was a different speed limit, and I just think governments in Australia try and trick you all the time. But I should have looked at the signs, And so you can sin out of ignorance. The other one that's the most interesting one for me is Acts 17:30, where Paul says about the past. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. So that's an indication that, sometimes I would feel free to say that to people. I would say, you didn't know, but now you do know. And there's a sense in which when you preach the law, it's kind of a bad thing for people, because it's showing up, wait a minute, how we've been living and what we've been doing is wrong, even though we thought it was right. So I think that's... What was your question?
I'm waiting. Yes, here we go. You've already answered the question, but just so that you know, we have been thinking and we've been doing our homework.
Mm-hmm.
We were asking, are there different levels of judgment for unbelievers on the judgment day?
Yeah.
And that's coming out of the second question.
Yeah. So there are, in Revelation, God will bring justice. Now we need to be careful in asking for that, because sometimes our idea of justice, because we don't think clearly, but there's no question that God will bring justice. And I to be honest, I look forward to that. There are some things in this world that won't get fixed and won't get sorted, but God will bring justice. Right, I just want to say something about the things that characterize our society. So I didn't want to sit with any of you, so I sat down and just did my own study. And I like alliteration. And I thought, these are the 5 things. And then I tried to put them all in with the letter P. So the first one is, paganism. Thanks, Noah. Can you give it back to Terry? You're a great help. First is paganism. What I mean by that is idolatry. Second is pride. I find it ironic that we have pride parades. Pride's a sin, in different ways. And that arrogance, we're great. The third, I would say, is poverty or ignoring the poor. It's a great sin, the injustice that goes on in the world. The fourth is perversity. And the fifth, just to get the alliteration, I called it purchase, because it's the idea that you can purchase whatever you want. And you can purchase happiness. In other words, materialism. And I think those are very prevalent sins within our culture. So, I want to wind this up. We go on to the last one. You'll see Tom Holland's Dominion there, by the way. I mentioned that, there was a quote at the beginning where Holland talked about how the cross changed the whole way our society thinks. And in particular this. We still live in if you like, it's like a house where the foundation and the structure was Christian, but now the decorations and the occupants and the windows and everything have become sub-Christian, and the rot has set in to the foundations, and the society will inevitably collapse. You cannot have Christian fruits without Christian roots. So I want to explain it in this way, that we've moved away from God, and as a result, God's moved away from us, if you like. We're in the far country like the prodigal son. And the prodigal son, he wasn't free, he was exploited and cruelly used. And here's a really key thing. The greater the distance from God, the greater the dislocation in human relationships. Now that is not saying, for example, let's say a couple come and their marriage has fallen apart and they become Christians, or one becomes a Christian. It doesn't mean that everything's going to be fixed immediately or even necessarily in the long term. It doesn't mean that, because in this world we have to carry a lot of things. But what it does mean is that a culture in which human beings acknowledge God at a national level, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Without vision the people perish. But also at a family level and at a personal level, it is a far healthier culture. It's not a sinless culture, but it's a far healthier one. And here's the paradox. When we had COVID in 2019, was it? Yeah, 2019. 2020. People were going on about, this is something completely new and all that kind of stuff. Yes and no. In the West, since 1918, when it was the Spanish influenza, we've been greatly protected and not had these kinds of illnesses. Before that, in the West and elsewhere, we had loads. We just weren't used to it. I think in our culture, we've become so used to Christian values that we assume them, and as they are removed, people are going to get really, really shocked. They've wished for something, but when they get it, it will be a real surprise to them. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Calvin says this, as they choose not to continue in the knowledge of God, which alone guides our minds to true wisdom, the Lord gave them a perverted mind, which can choose nothing that is right. So as we go on in Romans, you'll find that Paul talks about having a renewed mind and a different way of thinking. He talks about renewed bodies. He talks about a renewed creation. And that's what we need, and that's where the gospel is. So what Paul has done is, he's taken us pretty low, and he's going to go on to explain even more that all of us as individuals, so he's spoken about society, but all of us as individuals need that. So one thing is absolute. I need forgiveness, you need forgiveness. And we need it continually. And the great thing is that through Christ, we get forgiveness. And our society needs healing. You talk about, in the UK, they talk about broken Britain and so on. And Australia is a little bit protected because it's so wealthy. But listen, in Australia, we've got all this economic and, I would say, Christian capital. We're burning it up very quickly. And trouble will come to Australia. And we need, as a community, as a nation, to repent. But not just return to Christian values. We need to turn to Christ. So, okay, I'm going to leave it there. Let me pray, and then it's time for you to go. Lord, thank you for this amazing passage. Paul describes the world in which he lived, the Roman world, and it's a world that seems far away from us, and yet it's a world that's very similar to ours. There's great injustice, great perversity, great confusion. We bless you that Paul could write to the Romans and say there's good news, there's a gospel. It wasn't just a religious get-out. It was a teaching and practice that turned the world upside down. And we pray, O God, that you would work in our lives and that you would help each of us to know and to love and to serve you. For we ask it in your name. Amen.